Hello everyone and welcome to a new episode of Rural Germany. In this episode we are going to be focusing on the nature around Ersendorf. We're going to do a lot with forests, but we're also going to add some farmland around the town, and we're also going to build a rock formation on a nearby hill. So over here you see me placing some grass to separate the houses from the farm field that we just built. To make these fields I downloaded a map theme that converts the oil and ore texture into a farm field texture. This makes it pretty easy to make good looking farm fields without having to mess around with a billion networks. So that way I have two different farm fields, and because the oil and ore texture can't be directly next to each other, I place some grass and some trees to separate those two fields. We are starting to build one of the only still intact farms of the town, as over time the town got more and more focused on tourism, and most of the farms have been integrated in the expanding town. There was never a lot of farmland in this area because this is a more hillier part of the region, and in the Middle Ages most of the money was made by toll from the bridge and later on wood cutting. This house that we built over here has been built for the owner of the farm that we just built, because the farmer got so rich that he wanted to build a new house and not live in the old farmhouse anymore. He became so rich because every other farmer in the town sold their land to him, as they didn't want to continue farming, mainly because of the increasement of tourism in the town, and that way the owner of this farm slowly got more land until he owned every farmland in this entire town. Over here we are building one of many small roads that lead into the woods, although this one is wider than the others because this is the old main road for the woodcutters. So over here I'm using another way to create farm fields, and this is through tire marks. I just set the spacing in PropLine tool so low that they connect to each other, and in that way I could make it look as if there was a really nice farming field lying there. So the house that we are building over here is a good example of people that sold their land to the farmer because they didn't want to be farmers anymore. This house used to own a pretty fair amount of land, but now it is a hotel and barely owns any land because they don't need it. Over here we are fixing up the delineators. In Germany they are usually placed around 50 meters from each other, which is around 55 yards. And I'm not placing them exactly 50 meters from each other because that just wouldn't look good in my opinion, but I figured that they were a bit too close to each other, so I had to space it up a little more. I think they are now around 20 meters apart, something around that. But most important is that I think they look good with this distance. So now we are adding another house to make the town entrance look a bit better, and we are adding loads of grass to implicate an empty field. Just because the farmer that was buying a lot of land wasn't interested in this slice of land because it was too hilly and that way not suitable to drive with a tractor. In the past this has been used as farmland because there weren't any tractors and there was no reason to let this open, but in the present a tractor can't drive this slope, so it's useless. So while I was talking about that, we actually started detailing the interchange built in episode 2. We're using lots of different types of grass and trees to basically fill up the areas between this partial cloverleaf and make it look really nice. Quick side note, I got the suggestion to replace most of the bridges here with elevated ground level roads because that is more common in Germany, and that is true. So we will definitely change that in a future episode, probably when we will get back to detailing highways and stuff. I didn't know that by the time of doing this, otherwise I would have just upgraded it when I was detailing around it. So over here we are starting on the rock formation, which is based on Munterlei in Gerolstein, which is one of the places that I visited when going to the Eifel last year. I really liked the rock formation there, so I definitely wanted something like that in my city too. It's not 100% like that one, but the idea of building such a rock formation has been inspired by those rocks there. So of course, it wouldn't be me if I hadn't made up a story about this place. So in the last episode I told you guys about the story of Ersendorf Castle, and remember when I told you on the first attack on Ersendorf Castle that failed? That was mainly because of these rocks, because the Ersendorfers took place around these rocks and basically held up the entire army of the people from the flat area by shooting them from this high up place. They couldn't build a castle on these rocks because they were pretty unstable, and building a castle on there would just make everything collapse. But to get back to the story, eventually the people from the flat area managed to break through because there was just no castle or anything to hold them up forever. However, this battle had cost the people from the flat area so many lives that they weren't able to take the Ersendorf castle. So at the end, the Battle of the Munterlei has played a really big part in successfully defending the castle of Ersendorf from the people from the flat area. When the town got taken eventually after the castle burned down, the main reason that this happened was because there were no people on the rocks to defend because of all the chaos. That was the story of the Munterlei, and let's get back to the video. So while I was telling the story, we reworked an intersection over here and we expanded the railway. So this road that we're building over here is not a real main road. It is one of these typical country roads where you can still drive 100 kilometers an hour, but no one uses it because it's in the middle of nowhere. So over here we are placing this wall along the train tracks to mask the cliffs and to give the feeling that they really had to cut into the mountainside to be able to build these train tracks. So we move on with a parking in the middle of the woods for wanderers to start their trip from. It is just a dirt parking with some mud on it, some standing water, nothing special, but I really like how I made the mud blend in with the dirt because it just really looks like one big thing. I did a similar one in Westwood like a half a year ago. That wasn't as good as this one, but I just really like these kind of wildlife parkings, and they are also really common in these areas because there is no money and no need to build actual parking lots, but the tourists need to get to the mountains in some way, so they just park in the dirt and at some point it gets a parking spot. Over here we are starting on laying some more paths down in the forest, and I already mentioned it earlier in the video, but I find it really important to, if I detail a forest, add a lot of forest paths, because that is what you'll see in a real forest as well, and especially in this region you will have a lot of these semi-wide paths where you can just walk and have a nice trip. And I also found it really important that you can get to the rocks, not on the rocks, because as I said, it was unstable. Later on in this series we will also build a parking that is closer to the rocks, so it's actually better accessible. Anyways, that is it for this episode. We built a lot of nature stuff, built some farms, built a rock formation and a wildlife parking. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.